You're watching a recorded session from our virtual conference, Freelance Fest, brought to you by Top of the Funnel. Freelance Fest featured amazing sessions on everything from cold pitching and building a freelance pipeline to optimizing your LinkedIn profile. You can watch all of those sessions here on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check those out and subscribe. But I also want to invite you to become a member of Top of the Funnel. You can join over 4,000 writers, freelancers, entrepreneurs, and marketers who ask questions, share feedback, post pet pictures, find work opportunities inside our Slack community. It's 100% free to join. Just visit jointofu.co and sign up. Enjoy the workshop. So we have one final session, which is our live Q&A. Backstage right now, we've got Rachel and Liam. Hey, Brooklin, we're waiting for you. There he is. So we're going to bring those folks on in just a moment. I've mentioned this already several times, but if you have not already, pop some questions into the chat for our esteemed panel here. We'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can before we sign off. We've got about a little over half an hour, so we should be able to get through a decent chunk of questions and tackle as many topics as we possibly can. All right, Rachel, Liam, I see y'all are both on the video. Are you all ready to add here? Yeah. Okay, cool. And there's Brooklyn. Hey, Brooklyn, are you ready to pop in here? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure that you were gonna, I don't know, do something crazy before I added you. Hey, y'all. How are you guys?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hello. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for amazing workshop sessions. This has been a phenomenal event, and yeah, just excited to dive into some of our questions. We've got, I think I've got 13 already saved, so we have a lot to tackle here. So yeah, I guess let's just jump right into it, y'all. So one of the early questions that I got is actually, I think this will be an interesting one. So somebody was asking about for Brooklyn. This question was specifically for Brooklyn. They were saying they were asking if you were to ask a freelancer that you were trying to hire, like what their career goals were or what their goals were professionally. So maybe first of all, let's just tee that up. Like, is that the kind of question that you might ask a freelancer if you're interviewing or potentially hiring somebody? And if yes, then like, what are you looking for from that kind of a question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it's a little surprising to me. Maybe Liam, Rachel, you tell me if you've had a different experience. I've never received that question. I never received it as a freelancer. I've never asked it as someone who hires freelancers. That's really for like an in-house role.
I did get that question one time.
You did get it? Okay.
Yeah, but I was.
Let's hear about that.
I had been basically doing my usual LinkedIn LOI strategy to get clients and DMing people. And I DM'd somebody at a company that I wanted to work for, and they were like, oh yeah, actually we do need a writer right now, let me send you the right person. So they sent me to the right person, and it turns out it was actually for a full-time job, but I didn't know. So it was a full-time job interview, and I went in there and I was like, sorry, I'm a freelancer, I'm not looking for a full-time job, but you should hire me as a contractor for all these reasons. This is why I'm a freelancer, and these are my career goals if you want them. And then they ended up hiring me. So
Instead
but no,
of
I've never gotten it from someone who expected me to be a freelancer.
That's amazing. So they
you flipped it on its head.
Yeah.
I don't.
You can find full-time roles that you can turn into freelance or contract positions if you can convince them. If you are extremely interested and you know you're the perfect fit.
Yeah, I've used that strategy too, and sometimes they just haven't even thought of hiring a freelancer. They just think full-time role, send it out, maybe they're using HR. And so just presenting them the option of being like, hey, there's, like you were saying, Rachel, here's all the benefits of doing it as a freelancer. And also here's all the things I demand from you as well. But I've done that too. And it's turned into long-term clients.
Yeah.
Same here. It's a great play. You can do it on Sales Nav. You can look for hiring people who are hiring for specific roles or have just joined as a new full-time role, and both of those are great indicators to reach out and say, hey, do you need some outside help? Because usually folks like you need some outside help, and here's how I've helped them.
Nice. Yeah. Especially junior roles. It works really well for junior roles because they're going to pay like $60,000 to $80,000 a year for a junior copywriter in most non-major metropolitan areas. And most of those jobs are remote anyway. And like, I would do a way better job for the same rate. I'm not going to be available 24/7 like a junior copywriter would, but like, you don't need that because I'm going to do a good job. So
yeah, totally. So to bring it back to that question, you know, if you are applying for a freelance role or you're pitching a freelance role or whatever, and you get this question, you know, what are your career goals or whatever? To me, I would almost view that as like a red flag as a freelancer, that person doesn't really understand like a freelance relationship, or they sort of have like a different expectation. What about Brooklyn? Do you agree with that premise, or do you view it a different way?
Yeah, actually putting it as a red flag, I'd agree. Especially if you're in the US, like there's very strict laws about how you can treat a freelancer. And one of them is not managing them like you manage a direct report. And that question indicates that they expect to manage you like they would a full-time hire.
Totally. Rachel, Liam, any other thoughts on that question before we move on to the next one?
No, I completely agree. I will say I was like full-time solo traveling when I started freelancing and for the first 5 years of my freelance career. And if you are doing something like that, be straight up about it. If somebody asks you like, what are your goals or where are you located? Like just be straight up about it. But if they're asking it in a way that's like really structured, like a job interview, obviously it's a red flag. You guys are right. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I'm not going to add anything else.
Same. Retweet Rachel.
Amazing.
Post.
Cool. Well, let's maybe pivot a little bit. So Matt was asking questions. I think Liam, this was actually directed at you during your session. So Matt was asking about the ideal client list. I think you talked about that as part of your process. So, you know, he's saying if he is sort of doesn't necessarily have like a specific niche or what, like, do you have any tips for identifying a list of ideal clients?
Yeah. So like, I don't want to start any fights, but niche is like not a word that I like to use too much. I never had a niche, and I'm here like 10 years in without a niche. So I like to say interests. That's really what you should be going after, because especially with the kind of work that I do, it's a lot of content creation. I'm going to be writing about the same topics for a long period of time, hopefully, if I can maintain this client. So if I'm not interested in the topic, then it's like zero. Like, I've had people offer like sports stuff to me, and like, again, don't want to start any fights, but I hate sports, and I just say no, because I'm like, I'm gonna hate this job, even though it pays well, even though it's a good fit. So I would do some meditation on like, what are the things that you get energized about? What are the topics that you find interesting? I also think I mentioned this in my talk, but think about the products and services that you're using every day. Almost every time I've pitched to somebody and I come into the talk saying, hey, I'm already using this product, I already love it, that's such a good foot in the door. So like, do an inventory, like as you go throughout your day, just notice every kind, you know, like maybe not Apple if you're like using your iPhone, but like little, you know, any sort of software that you're using, or anybody that you're subscribed to and you follow, that kind of thing. So that's how I start with it, right? I just start thinking about like, what's a company that I would actually be interested in working for, and or I already have experience with.
I love that. And Rachel, I think you mentioned also in that you kind of took that approach and worked with a bunch of companies that were sort of in your lifestyle niche, if you will.
Yeah, totally. I just take note of like every product I'm using. When I was doing backpacking, I like went and copied the brands list from REI as my ideal clients list. Like I still write for the outdoor industry, or like Garage Grown Gear. Those brands are smaller, so they need a lot more help. Like I'm a fractional CMO for 3 different Garage Grown Gear brands now at this point, and it's like it's a really good way to grow your skills really quickly because they need a lot of help. But so just like, you know, pick an interest and find a place where you can find a list of those things. I love the B Corp directory if you're looking for ethical, sustainable brands. I love using Crunchbase if you're looking for someone who has enough funding to pay you a higher rate. All of my highest paying clients found on Crunchbase, they were Series B funding or higher, Series C. And yeah, I agree. Like I say pick a niche, but not because you need to use it to market yourself. I say pick a niche so that you know who to target for your ideal clients. And it does obviously help to optimize your search on LinkedIn. Like your headline, if it has a niche in it, you're obviously going to show up in more searches when people are searching for writers who write for that niche or whatever. But like, you know, just go after what lights you up, especially if you have ADHD. You're not going to make it if you're bored.
I love that. I love that. Brooklin, I think you had sort of an interesting take on this, because you were saying that you were actually, when you're evaluating writers, you're looking for a variety in their portfolio. Can you say a little bit more about that again?
Yeah, that one actually felt like the hardest bit to try to cover because it seems contradictory. Like I do see a lot of value in niche experience. Like some of our best writers, we started them because they had been writing in the HR space for 5 years or in IT infrastructure, whatever it is, right? What I meant by variety is what I got myself stuck in was MarTech SEO content, which is, I don't mean this as offense to anybody, but in terms of earning potential, that's probably some of the lowest paying work you can get, at least within tech. So it's the common denominator for content. Like you need it at scale, so they're going to pay less. It's commoditized, right? So what I meant by somebody with a variety of experience, I don't just mean vertical or niche, because like you, Liam, I don't like the idea of niching down. I don't think you have to niche down. I didn't niche down beyond just B2B SaaS, but a variety of deliverables. Like I want to see that you've been able to turn around an ebook or a case study and this type of article, a feature article, and a roundup. Not that you need all of them, but your portfolio shouldn't be one long list of the same type of content for the same type of client. And then the benefit in there is I mean, Liam and Rachel, you both said this, like the key here is what your interest is and where you can imagine yourself writing for the next, maybe don't say 10 years, but the next 3 years, let's say. Can I write about this stuff for the next 3 years? When I was writing product descriptions for e-commerce brands, the answer was no. So I had to make a shift, right?
I love that. Yeah, and I think we talked about this actually in the previous Q&A too, is that, and you brought it up in your session, which I think is maybe something that people don't always think about, but a niche doesn't have to be like a specific vertical or industry, right? You can niche in a lot of different ways, whether that's, like a specific topic or vertical or industry, but also could be specific, different types of deliverables or systems or processes, like you mentioned, Brooklyn, at Beam. So I think picking your niche is really about just like picking some defining characteristic about what you do that sets you apart from everybody else. It doesn't have to be, I only write B2B, SEO blogs for HR software companies, right? It doesn't have to be that specific of a niche.
Yep.
Cool. Let's I want to talk a little bit. So Brooklyn, you mentioned the idea of like MarTech SEO content being sort of a crowded space, and I was wondering, from the experience of the other folks on this call, like Liam, I guess, do you find, are there certain niches that you would avoid? Let me frame it that way.
I mean, on a personal level, there's plenty that I would avoid. Like,
okay. Well, yeah. Let me reframe that. From sort of like a viability perspective, like because you don't think there's a market opportunity there, or they're really low paying, or they're hyper competitive.
Well, I don't think there's a specific industry or niche, but I think like anyone who's been freelancing for a while, I have lists of things that are certainly red flags for me that I hunt for in the lead process, like as I'm refining my leads and refining my pipeline. So like when people want to work with me and they send me a message, they get a questionnaire, like just 2 questions asking them like how much are they planning on spending on content every month. And if it's less than $2,000, I just reply and I say, sorry, it's my minimum. That's just getting those tire kickers out of the way. So like those are like, there are certain types of people, or like anybody who doesn't already understand at least SEO basics, red flag. Because I'm not here to teach anybody. I mean, I am here to teach anybody, but not the basics. I'm here to teach them above the basics. So I don't know that there's any particular industry, but there are certain types of people and certain types of companies that have like a mental list of, and we should turn into a blog of like, this is what I would watch out for. Actually, no, wait, I already wrote a blog on it, and I will share that somewhere in there in the archives.
Well, what about you, Rich? Are there any sort of niches or areas or a focus that you think are sort of off limits or people should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, I second everything Liam said, but I will also put in that hotels and restaurant groups almost always have some kind of parent company that has in-house PR and marketing and all that stuff. It's going to be extremely hard as a freelancer if you are not starting an entire agency to work with groups like that. So don't bother. You will waste your time. Don't throw away your time. I had a one-on-one client who wanted to work in the travel space, and I told her like where to target in the travel space, and she was like, well, I really just want to write for hotels, so I'm going to do that. And then she spent 6 months trying to get a hotel client, which obviously didn't work. She finally talked to a freelancer in the hotel industry and found out that they all work as conglomerates like that, and it's really hard to make it. I will also say the outdoor industry is the exciting stuff, very low paying, probably not going to create a sustainable career for you. Every name that you can name that you might know off the top of your head from reading Outside Magazine or anything that you would want to be featured in also has somebody paying the gigs, an anchor client in tech, or they're doing like fractional CMO work like I am, or whatever in other areas. So just know if you want to like get a byline in print or on a blog that your mommy and daddy will see because you thru hiked and you wrote a blog about it, you're not going to get paid a lot for it. Do not plan your career on that. I made that mistake when I first started. I learned the hard way. That's my 2 cents about it, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like the trend there is like the more fun something is, the less you're gonna get paid to do it, because everybody else also thinks it sounds fun and they'll do it for nothing. So
and just like
my most
Sorry.
Go ahead, brother. What were you gonna say?
Probably my most controversial tweet ever is that content marketing is just crappy journalism with better pay.
Yeah.
People either love it or hate it.
I would retweet that.
Can I ask just a quick controversial while we're on red flags? Do any of the three of you work with CEOs directly, or is that have you made that into a deal breaker?
I have. Depends on the size of the company.
And will continue to. Okay. Depends on what stage you're at. Gotcha.
Yeah, I work with a lot of small businesses and some startups too, so it is kind of inevitable. But I always prefer
comes with the territory.
Yeah,
there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm doing like content writing, absolutely not. If I'm doing like a full service marketing done for you package with launch planning and email copywriting, and I'm setting up automations and all that stuff, absolutely sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Brooklyn?
Not anymore. This is a freelance. This is a safe space, the freelance space, right? So it's actually a deal breaker in our documentation. Is we will not work if the CEO is the direct point of contact. That's a deal breaker for us.
Same. Yeah. I think
which is none of this is universal, but same. Okay.
Yeah. We went through the same process, and we because we have almost always worked with startups, and so they were sort of varying sizes. Sometimes they were early enough that we were working like directly with the CEO. And we inevitably found that those were almost always like the shortest lived clients, and there was the most headaches. And it was just because they were just too early. They were too small. They didn't really have the vision to like invest in what we were doing from a content perspective. I think at that stage. So totally understand that. I wanted to ask another question. So this is a question that I actually get a lot, and we see this a lot in tofu. So, Brooklyn, maybe I'll start with you because you sort of brought this up, right? So as a freelancer, I think one of the top tips and advice that you get is that like, hey, you should have like your own process, and like you should tell your client like, this is how I work. Like, you know, you're going to hire me, I'm going to do my process. Does that change when you're an agency hiring a freelancer? As an agency, you have your own process. Do you expect your freelancers to work within your process, or do you let them have their own process sort of outside of your workflow, Brooklin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's why I split it in two. I think there's two pieces to the process. There's like the client-facing process of how you onboard them. Liam's questionnaire that he sends, even just as early as in the sales process as possible. If you're guiding it, that all the more the better. So through the sales process, I think I'd like to see that, like follow-ups and engagement. I see Angela Rollins here. I see Manu Castillo. Like, they're on our bench waiting for the right project, right? And it certainly helps to see them like engaging, right? So just being proactive, not necessarily having this is my process and you need to stick with that as an agency.
Yeah.
What you should have, even if it is for an agency, and what we do look for is, and I ask about in our first 15-minute call, is what's your writing process look like? You get a topic and a brief, what does it look like from there? And I want to see a really clear answer of, okay, I do this first, and then I take this step, and then I email you questions, and then I dig into the research, and then I do this. It doesn't matter what the process is, as long as you're clear on what works for you to turn around things on time, and then that's backed up by client testimonials. That's what I'm looking for. It's like your own internal writing process.
Yep. Yeah, and I should say, I think from the agency side, it's our job to have those defined like handoff points, right? So as a freelance writer, you know, I'm going to give you this, you're going to take it, and then you're going to come back to me and you're going to give me this, right? And so as a freelancer, you know exactly what your job is, and what your process looks like to write that or to go from A to B. That's your choice, but the point being is that you still have to plug into some kind of a workflow or process generally. So that was mostly what I was curious about. What about you, Liam? Do you, I guess, how rigid is your process versus like adopting sort of the requirements of a client or an agency if you're working with them?
It's my process or the highway. Personally, I mean, like I don't work with agencies, so usually it's me and the company, and they don't have a process in place. So part of what I'm selling is this process that I've developed over the last 10 years that's really, really good and doesn't actually need any help at all. It's perfect as is. If you do it perfectly, it works really well. So that's part of my sales pitch is like, I come to people who are, maybe they feel like things are chaotic. They don't have a strategy. They don't have, a process. And a big part of my sales is here's a really, really good process. And that also is because I am a control freak and I don't like to fit into other people's processes, especially when it works really well and delivers results. So it's sort of my gentle way of saying, but this is also one of the reasons I don't work with agencies very often is because they often have their own processes and that's fine. It's not going to work for me. But I worked in agencies for 10 years. I was on the other side of the equation. That's where I built my process, right? I learned this process. I took it from running a content agency in Sydney, and then I just developed it for my own business. So, but a little bit better. So anyway, that's just to say, yeah, I have a very specific process, but it's part of my package.
Yeah. I'll say this one note on that, which is that, again, going back to that idea of like niching or like finding your audience and who you're trying to reach, like that alone like disqualifies a huge chunk of people, right? And that's totally good. That's fine. Like that should be how you approach it, right? Is that like, I don't want to bend my process. I want to do A to Z and I want to own that whole process. Then that's going to put you on a course to work with specific types of clients that are going to take that and want that, right? And it's not going to work for other clients. Like you said, it's not going to work for agencies or whatever. That's the whole game right there, right? You've just narrowed down your audience by 50% or whatever. So I love that tip. But what about you, Rachel? What does your process look like, or how do you how sort of flexible is it?
I think it helps that I teach other freelancers how to do my job. So I have like a Notion area, I guess you could say, that has all of my processes listed out, and then I have like pre-recorded videos of me teaching them so that people in my membership community can learn. And when a client asks me how I do something, I usually just send them that video and a little example or a little explanation of like how I might change it for them. My portfolio is entirely made up of case studies, so I can also just send them a case study of a company that's just like theirs and how I did it for them if I wanted to. I think like across the board, it's pretty much always the same, even if the client thinks it's different. Like I have had multiple SEO clients in SaaS that expect me to do it their way, but like all their ways are the same. So it just doesn't really matter. Like I'm flexible to do it your way, but like at the end of the day, it's all basically the same. So it just doesn't really matter, I guess, especially if it's SEO content. Like it's pretty much always the same. I do my best. They like it. We move on, you know?
I love that. Yeah. Again, it's all about what are you ultimately selling, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Can I add a PS there? Because I love that. Well, both of you shared, but tell me if either of you had a different experience or any of the three of you. But I feel like with all this talk of process, I want to add, don't feel like you have to develop this perfect offer, this perfect process, and then go sell it.
Yeah,
I literally, the midpoint after about 5 years of freelancing, and then between year 5 and 8, when we started launching Beam, the only difference was I started saying, yeah, I can do that. And then I went and figured out how to build a process for that. And then I sold that process. And like Liam said, I literally would sell deals based on the process that I built while getting paid to build that process. So like, just dive in, do a V1, an MVP, and then sell it to another client and improve. And then after a year or two, you're going to have that dialed in.
You'll learn as you go. Like I always tell people, experience is the best teacher. You can read all the books you want. You can take that copy pasty course. I did. I paid for it. I took it. But at the end of the day, like that's not what's going to get you a process. That's not what's going to help you feel confident at work. That's not what's going to like have you know what you're doing. You'll know what you're doing after you wrote 100 blogs, right? That's how it works. And there's no way around it. And that kind of sucks, but it's also great. Like I'm 7 years in. That's why I have these things. And because I teach other freelancers, I would never expect a first year freelancer to like have a Notion database of like all the ways they write things and a video walkthrough for their clients. Like that's crazy. No one's asking that. Just at least be able to articulate, yes, I first make an outline, then I look for sources so that I can make sure that there's experts. Then I ask you questions if I have any of them. Then I write, then I edit, right? Like have something, but you don't need to have everything like this.
Liam, does your process change? Are you set in stone at this point?
No, of course it changes because SEO changes, so you have to change things. But there are certain things that don't change, not really. And yeah, I totally agree. Like I had to learn this stuff. Like I didn't even know what SEO was when I started working in SEO. Right? Like you have to just kind of like learn as you go. But I will say there are like, I'm going to make myself sound old, but like compared to when I started, the amount of resources available for freelancers now is like, I just took all of my processes and just published them on my website because I was like, I wish someone had given me these and I didn't have to spend 10 years making these. I wish I just had them. And now like the content calendar that I spent like 5 or 6 years perfecting is now available for free on my website. And like, I'm obviously in the room with other people who have these kinds of resources too. So, there's no shame in stealing these things and using them as your own process. Give credit where credit is due, but like my process works really well. That's why I want people to use it. It's not because, like that's why I'm giving it away. And I think, there's a fine line, but like certainly borrow what's out there, especially within this community, within Tofu. Totally. Like you're just going to drown in resources if you start poking around.
Yep.
Yeah, Tyler.
In a good way. In a good way.
7 years ago.
Come on.
We're all drowning.
I will say one thing that I feel like I just recently learned was that having that process and having it documented makes it easier to change, not harder. I feel like that's sort of counterintuitive, or it was to me, right? It was like, so that way I can go back and say, oh, like I did this and it didn't work that well this time. So like I'm going to adjust my process so that next time I do it a slightly different way, right? Like
Tyler,
then
you're
I
just
can evolve.
explaining the scientific method.
Yeah, basically, essentially, that's what it is, right? I mean, that is, and yeah, just like Brooklyn was saying, right? It's like I'm 10 years into running an agency, we still change our processes constantly, right? Like they're still evolving, they're still changing. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll stop belaboring that point. Angela had a question, which I think is an interesting sort of jumping off point. So she was asking, I think she was talking specifically about Brooklyn's follow-up process when she asked this question. But basically, her question is, if you're pitching a client and you're not hearing back from them and you've sent them like pricing, do you start lowering the price, Brooklyn?
To me first, I guess it was
Yeah.
my session. 4 years ago, Brooklyn. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be like, okay, I can do it for 1,000. Okay, I can do it for 500. Now, like to use Liam's words, it's our pricing or it's the highway, and not in it doesn't have to be rude. It can be, here's our minimum. Here's my minimum as a freelancer. Here's how I work. Here's my pricing. What we don't adjust on is the price itself. What we do get flexible on is the scope. If you're talking to someone, this is maybe 50% of the time when I'm talking to a prospect, they know what they need. They just need to make a case to their boss and their boss's boss that it's worth investing X amount in it. So that's when you can get flexible and dig into where the internal blockers are, what the person you're talking to's goals are, and then see if you can adjust and start with a smaller chunk of work first. And be like, what if we prove it out with XYZ over 3 months instead of signing you up for this bigger 6-month scope? The pricing itself per article or case study or whatever doesn't change. It's just, we're just getting flexible on the scope so that we can kind of like jump in and prove it out.
Yeah. I would say too, the other thing that we do is sort of changing the scope, essentially what you're saying, Brooklyn. But like, instead of us writing the briefs, you're going to write the brief, right? And so then we can like adjust the price based on that or whatever, right? So sort of negotiating on the terms, as it were. What about you, Liam? How much wiggle room does your pricing have? I'm going to guess not a lot.
Not much, but I think I really resonate with what Brooklyn is saying. Like when I send a pitch or like a proposal rather, it's broken down very, very clearly, every little service that I'm going to do, and has a price next to it so that it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, sure, we can come down $1,000. But there goes, the monthly reporting. And like one of the maybe slightly more sneaky things I recommend people do is just have a management fee. So that, that quote, like, know your worth and add taxes. It's like one of my favorite quotes for freelancers, and also add a management fee, because like $500 to $1,000 management fee is really easy to just say, I'm going to waive that as a way to like come down on price for you. So worst case scenario, they pay a management fee, which they should be paying anyway. And best case scenario, you just like go into it with the mentality that like that's gravy. And that if they want to negotiate, you have that little cushion that you built in to knock off.
That's amazing. And what about you, Rachel?
First of all, Liam, that is genius. What the heck? I have never heard that.
Learn that in
I've heard of
learn that in agency.
Oh, agency, classic agency behavior. Of course. I would actually default to my test piece guide. I have like a guide on whether or not you should do test pieces for clients, which like most clients expect. Surprise, especially in content. But I think that it depends on where you are in your career and what your goals are. When I desperately needed clients when I first started, I had zero experience, never worked in corporate, never worked in marketing, knew nothing about SEO, silly me. And I didn't go to school for marketing. I had nothing going for me basically. And I was just like trying to convince anybody to hire me. At that point, I would reach out to them and say, hey, actually, I'm happy to do a free test piece to show you my skills and show you that I'm the right fit for you. Would you be willing to do that? And if they say yes, then I have like a whole template for that. But if you do have some experience and you're not desperate for clients, or you're just not desperate for clients, you could offer like a discounted test. So like 20 to 50% off of what your normal rates are, again, to show them. And if you have demonstrated experience, absolutely never, ever, ever lower your pricing below your baseline level. I would say like some experience, or the point where I would not lower pricing is if you have at least 3 clients or 3 examples of something that you did for a client in the niche or service that you're offering. So say you just started email copywriting, maybe your first 3 you offer to do a free test before you start working with them. If you've been email copywriting and you've already had 3 clients, don't back down. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, you can change the scope if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to. Like, maybe that's just not the right client for you. And also, if you just keep following up with them, they will eventually cave. Like, follow up with them for 2 years straight every quarter. Like, it might just not be the right time for them. You know what I mean? They might not have a budget right now. They might not need your help right now. But 2 years from now, they probably will. And if you're persistent, but in a polite way, quarterly, when they're already making decisions anyway and need your help, and you're just like there on time, awesome. But like, there are clients that I literally chased for like 3 years. It took me 2 years to land Grammarly. And they were so happy when I was there for them to hire, and I did not need to change my prices. So I don't know. That's what I would defer to.
I love that. I feel like freelancers underappreciate how much chaos there is inside the client companies, which is often the reason why you don't hear back from clients, is not because they don't like you or because your price is too high. It's because there's just like things are on fire everywhere and they're trying to just like get a meeting with their boss or whatever.
Yeah, there are clients that I've gotten after 7 follow-ups, and people are like, "You're sending 7 follow-ups? That's psychotic." And I'm like, "No, that's being helpful. Like, you're just showing up at the right time for them." And they didn't respond to a single one of those other follow-ups. And then when they did respond, they were like, "Oh, thank God you messaged me. I like actually really need help right now." Thanks. Every single person that I've gotten after 5 follow-ups has said, "Thanks for being persistent." And it's not hard for me because I have follow-up templates and I have them scheduled. That's all you have to do. Like, just copy and paste on the day you're supposed to send it, and it works out. And like, that's when it pays to have a system, which I think we've really nailed it. Nailed
I was gonna say, I mean, like, it's systems all the way down, guys. It's systems all the way down. Amazing. Well, we are at time, so we're gonna have to wrap up here. First of all, apologies that we didn't get to all the questions, but Rachel, Liam, Brooklyn, thank you so much, y'all, for the amazing workshops. Thank you for answering all of our questions. Today has been amazing. Thank you all for joining us live as well. A couple quick wrap up things here. Number 1, if you haven't already joined Tofu, go do that. Join tofu.co. Join our free Slack community. Why wouldn't you? Amazing people inside, amazing events, etc. Also hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Thank you. And finally, a quick reminder, if you signed up for the afternoon networking calls, the Tofu Connect calls, those are happening right now. We're actually 2 minutes late, so sorry about that. Go jump on those, meet some fellow attendees, ask questions, get feedback, make lifelong friends. Y'all, thank you again so much. Thank you, Rachel, Liam, Brooklyn. Thanks, guys, for joining. And thanks, everyone, for attending today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting,
so much.
Tyler.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, y'all. Have a good one.
Well,
Bye.